The moment the navigation core was swapped, the flagship Red Crow was skimming the edge of a black hole's gravity well. The gravitational field warped the curvature of spacetime around the starship. On the bridge's main screen, the star map crumpled like a wad of paper. Every frame of reference failed within 30 seconds. When the shipboard AI issued its final navigation data verification request, the response came in the form of a forged safety audit report. The digital signature was flawless, biometric authentication passed without a hitch, and at the bottom of the report in the signature block was the name of the chief architect, Han Shu. 26 light-years away, at United Fleet headquarters, alarms tore through the Navigation Oversight Center. On the main display, the blip representing Red Crow was plunging into an irreversible gravity trap, its descent curve steep as a stock chart sliced in half. Over the comm channel, the captain's voice was stretched by gravitational redshift into an unrecognizable low-frequency drone. The last complete phrase, parsed by the AI, projected onto the screen. Navigation data. Anomaly. Then the signal died. The blip vanished. Everyone in the oversight center rose to their feet simultaneously, the scrape of chairs against the floor merging into a single shriek. Somebody knocked over a coffee cup. Brown liquid spread across the console. Nobody wiped it up. Han Shu was arrested aboard a transport vessel 3.7 light-years from Red Crow. He was crouched in the cargo bay, wrench in hand, repairing a faulty curvature compensator, when magnetic cuffs locked around his wrists. The charge on the arrest warrant was gross navigational safety violation, resulting in catastrophic loss. The signing authority was Chen Guanhai, director of the United Fleet Logistics Command. The date stamp preceded Red Crow's loss of contact. The trial was held in the United Fleet Military Tribunal. The courtroom was buried inside a barren asteroid called Reef Rock, where gravity was 3/10 of Earth standard and everyone walked as if floating. When Han Shu was led into the defendant's box, he noticed Chen Guanhai sitting in the front row of the gallery, the 3 gold stars on his epaulets scattering pinpricks of light under the cold lamps. Next to him sat Zhou Binghuai, deputy director of the Interstellar Navigation Authority. The two men leaned toward each other occasionally, murmuring, their expressions loose, as if discussing a weekend golf game. At the prosecutor's table stood Zhang Lan, a military prosecutor notorious for her ferocity. Her nickname inside the fleet was Zero Acquittals. No case she prosecuted had ever ended in a not guilty verdict. The main screen lit up, displaying the navigation architecture of the Red Crow class that Han Shu had designed. Zhang Lan circled several nodes marked in red with her laser pointer, her tone as steady as an academic lecture. The defendant embedded an unreported backdoor interface in the core module of the gravitational field compensation algorithm. This interface could be passively triggered under specific conditions, leading to systematic deviations in navigational calculations. It was precisely this design flaw that caused Red Crow's navigation system to lose control at the edge of the black hole's gravity well, steering the entire starship onto an erroneous course. She turned to face the judge's bench, her voice rising half a notch. This was no accident. It was the inevitable consequence of a deliberate design defect. Han Shu did not defend himself from start to finish. He sat in the defendant's chair, the magnetic locks of his cuffs clamped to the metal armrests. A glass of water with a slice of lemon sat before him, its surface a perfect sphere in the microgravity. He stared at that globe of water and suddenly remembered the day the Red Crow's navigation core underwent its first integrated test. All parameters had run smoothly in the simulator, the course curves smooth as silk. Back then, Chen Guanhai had stood behind him, clapped him on the shoulder and said, "Good work, old Han. This thing will keep the fleet safe for 30 years. Now the hand that had clapped his shoulder had become a handcuff, and those safety-guaranteeing parameters had become evidence of a crime. Han Shu spoke only once. "I request the real-time navigation log of Red Crow and the original memory dump of the navigation core." Zhang Lan did not turn around. Her tone was matter-of-fact. The navigation log was lost along with Red Crow when it fell into the black hole. Physically irretrievable. What about the AI's quantum memory dump? There should be a backup at fleet headquarters. Han Shu kept his eyes on the judge's bench. The lead judge flipped through the electronic case file, turned a few pages, then looked up. The case record indicates that the backup server suffered an electromagnetic pulse incident on the day of the accident. All data was destroyed. The relevant technical personnel have issued a formal report, which this court accepts. Han Shu fell silent. He lifted the glass, sucked the floating sphere of water into his mouth, and set the glass down. The base clinked softly against the table. He understood then that he was not facing a miscarriage of justice. He was facing a precisely calculated execution. At sentencing, the judge did not read the full verdict. He said only 3 words. Life. Penal. Exile. In the gallery, Zhang Lan closed her laptop and gathered her files with practiced routine. Chen Guanhai stood, tugged the hem of his uniform jacket, and shook hands with Zhou Binghuai beside him. Their gazes did not meet as they shook. Each looked toward a separate exit. Nobody looked at the defendant's box. The exile planet was campus. On interstellar shipping charts it was labeled Mining Waste World. Atmospheric sulfur content exceeds life tolerance limits. No development value. The United Fleet operated 6 extraction zones there, using prisoners and exiles as cheap labor. When the transport ship dumped Han Shu at the surface station of Extraction Zone 6, they didn't even leave him a proper protective suit. The guard shoved him. He stumbled 2 steps onto campus's surface, and the soles of his boots immediately registered the characteristic burn of sulfide. The soil on this planet had a sulfate content above 40%, slowly corroding most organic materials. The station airlock slammed shut behind him, the metallic crash sounding like a coffin lid sealing. Han Shu survived on campus. The work in Extraction Zone 6 was sorting. In the high-sulfur environment, mechanical equipment corroded 17 times faster than normal. The mine operators preferred human labor. Humans were cheap and replaceable. Every morning at 5:30, an air horn shrieked over the barracks, and 1,200 miners poured out of corrugated iron shacks, wearing frayed protective suits and filter masks, forming a gray human river that flowed toward the extraction zone. Han Shu was assigned to conveyor belt number 3. His job was to stand at the end of the belt, pick out the deep yellow rocks with excess sulfur content from the ore stream, and toss them into the waste chute. The conveyor never stopped, running 16 hours a day. The ore streamed past his eyes like a yellow river, every rock looking more or less identical. In the first month, the sulfides corroded his fingers into a web of cracks. The skin on his fingertips peeled off in sheets, revealing raw, bright red dermis beneath. The extraction zone's infirmary offered only a cheap spray-on skin sealant. When applied, it formed a transparent film instantly, but that film lasted less than 2 hours at the conveyor belt before the ore wore it through. He learned to wrap his fingers with rubber strips torn from old conveyor belts, winding layer after layer until his fingers were as thick as carrots, and then he kept working. The filter masks issued by the mine were the oldest models. In campus's atmosphere, their filter cartridges lasted only 1/5 of their rated lifespan. Miners were allotted 1 cartridge per month. After it was spent, you flipped it over and made do with the reverse side. Han Shu learned to control his breathing rate, minimizing the depth of each inhale to stretch the cartridge a few extra days. At night, back in the iron shack, when he removed his mask, he would cough up pale yellow phlegm, protective mucus secreted by his lungs in response to the sulfide irritation. His shack was at the far edge of the camp, right next to the slag dumping ground. The window was a welded-shut steel plate. Inside there was an iron bed frame, a plastic chair, and an ancient air filtration unit, the only appliance in the room that still ran. It emitted a low-frequency hum, like a dying insect fluttering its wings. Every day after work, Han Shu collapsed onto the bed, fell asleep to that hum, and was jolted awake at dawn by the air horn. At the end of the 2nd year, old Mo in the next shack was dismissed due to pulmonary fibrosis. The mine's personnel supervisor didn't even give him severance pay, just a transport ticket off campus. On the day he left, old Mo was coughing so hard he couldn't straighten his back. He stood by the conveyor belt for a long time, holding its edge, before 2 younger miners finally hauled him onto the transport's airlock. Han Shu watched from the belt as the transport lifted off, its engine plume carving a gray-white scar across the sulfur-yellow sky, quickly swallowed by the wind-blown dust. He lowered his head and went back to sorting ore, his rubber-wrapped fingertips snatching a chunk of deep yellow slag from the rock stream with precision and flicking it into the waste chute. His rhythm never broke. In the 3rd year, he used 2 years' worth of saved wages to buy a second-hand data terminal. He got it on the camp's black market. The casing was cracked, half the screen was dead pixels, but the kernel could still run basic computational frameworks. Most second-hand electronics in the mining zone came from scrapped mining equipment control units, their data long wiped clean. But this terminal had a fragment of residual code, an incomplete navigation algorithm demo. After work, Han Shu returned to his iron shack and read that code line by line on the half-broken screen. It was crudely written, with many outdated function calls, but it awakened memories that Exile and Sulfur had temporarily buried. He couldn't sleep that night, lying on his back, staring at the rust stains on the iron ceiling. His mind autoran the complete architecture of the Red Crow class navigation system, the gravitational field compensation algorithm, the curvature coupling coefficients, the multidimensional course calibration. Every module he had designed for Red Crow's navigation core reassembled itself on that terminal's half-dead pixels. He realized his brain was like a formatted hard drive. The data hadn't truly been lost. It had just been written into deeper tracks. All he needed was a boot sequence. He rolled out of bed, turned on the terminal, and began rewriting the first line of code for the Red Crow navigation core. From that day forward, he spent every off-duty hour writing code. The cracks on his fingers wept tissue fluid as he typed, the droplets seeping into the gaps between the keycaps and drying into a transparent crust. He didn't care. The precision he'd honed sorting or on the conveyor belt, the sub-second reaction time and the millimeter-level muscle memory required to pluck sulfurous rocks, transferred directly to the keyboard. His hands were steadier than before his imprisonment. In the fourth year, he completed 70% of the navigation core's architectural reconstruction. One night he tested a critical module, the multidimensional gravitational field compensation function, the most complex algorithmic unit in Red Crow's old navigation system. The module ran successfully. The output results matched the benchmark data he generated in the Fleet Lab 7 years earlier, down to the last decimal. He stared at the green verification passed on the screen, his fingers hovering motionless over the keyboard for a full 30 seconds. Then he shut down the terminal, walked to the water bucket in the corner of the shack, and plunged his entire face into the ice-cold water. Sulfur-tainted water surged into his nasal cavity. He jerked his head up, water splashing against the iron wall and streaming down the rust. In the 5th year, he acquired a civilian-grade quantum communication module through the camp black market. Its encryption level was barely sufficient for interstellar parcel post. The transmission bandwidth was as narrow as a drinking straw, capable of carrying maybe a few kilobytes per second. Han Shu didn't intend to use it for data transmission. He just needed an access point. He constructed a covert encrypted tunnel atop the civilian protocol layer using mathematical methods, the principle based on the no-cloning theorem of quantum states using very large primes. Each communication session generated a one-time key, and any interceptor would see nothing but a string of legitimate commercial logistics data. In the camp library, really just an iron hut with a few battered public terminals, he used a public account to register a virtual address for a logistics company, disguised the comm module as an edge node of the mining camp's procurement system, and connected to the interstellar network. In the 3rd month of his 6th year, he successfully connected back to the civilized world for the first time. The first thing he did was not to contact anyone, but to search public information about the Red Crow incident. The fleet headquarters official accident investigation concluded structural deficiency in navigation system. The responsible party was listed as Chief Architect Han Shu. The report cited extensive technical details, every single one pointing precisely at the algorithmic architecture he had designed, every single one sufficient to convince anyone with a technical background of his guilt. The report's appendix bore Chen Guanhai's signature, Zhang Lan's legal opinion, and technical assessments from 3 independent experts, 2 of whom had retired after the incident, and 1 of whom had died in a transport accident in the 3rd year. He found other information. Chen Guanhai was now Director General of the United Fleet Logistics Command, for gold stars on his epaulets, overseeing all fleet-wide navigation planning and safety audits, one of the most powerful men in the fleet. Zhang Lan had been promoted 3 ranks in the wake of the Red Crow disaster, and now served as Chief Justice of the Interstellar Arbitration Court, presiding over all cases involving interstellar navigational safety. Zhou Binghuai had retired, but his son Zhou Shuren had founded a company called Star Zenith Navigation 5 years ago. The company had secured exclusive operating rights to the very shipping lane Red Crow had been meant to traverse, a route to an asteroid belt rich in rare minerals, and was now generating annual profits exceeding 60 billion interstellar credits. That route should have died with Red Crow, but the accident investigation had concluded that the route itself was without flaw. The fault lay in the navigation system. Thus, the route was reopened and, as part of an optimized resource allocation, transferred to a private enterprise. Han Shu sat before the camp's public terminal for a long time. The terminal's fan whirred, blowing hot air that smelled of sulfur and soldering flux. Around him, a few miners queued impatiently, banging on the iron walls. He closed the pages, cleared the browsing history entry by entry, and left the library. Walking back to his shack, campus's wind-driven sand lashed his faceplate. He heard the sound of his own breathing compressed by the filter into a low, heavy airflow, like some kind of pressure vessel slowly charging. In the 7th year, a woman named Gunyan arrived at the campus mining camp. That morning, Han Shu was at his usual post at the end of conveyor belt number 3. The 8 a.m. sulfur wind gusted in from the east side of the extraction zone, dropping visibility below 50 meters. A thin yellow dust filmed every miner's faceplate. The conveyor ran as always, the ore stream flowing past his eyes, his right hand moving through it with a steady rhythm, picking waste, tossing it into the chute, as precise as an industrial robot. A figure appeared on the other side of the conveyor belt. Han Shu's peripheral vision caught the silhouette, not a miner. Miners didn't stand upwind of the belt, where sulfur concentration was highest. Old-timers knew to avoid that spot. And she wasn't wearing standard-issue camp protective gear, but a deep blue jumpsuit so clean it reflected the light, with a face mask of the most expensive military spec, rated for 97 hours of filtration efficiency in a high-sulfur environment. She stood beside the conveyor for 10 minutes, watching Han Shu sort through 3 full bins of ore. Then she walked around the belt, approached him and removed her mask. The face beneath it bore no marks of sulfide erosion. Her skin was clean, her eyes sharp. When she spoke, her voice was low, but every word was crisp, as if optimized for voice sprint clarity. Mr. Han Shu, my name is Gunyan. I'm an independent investigator with the United Fleet's Internal Investigations Division. Regarding the Red Crow disaster 7 years ago, we have some new findings that require your professional judgment. Would you be willing to speak with me? Han Shu looked at her through his old faceplate. The visor was covered in fine scratches, fragmenting her face into 1,000 pieces. He didn't stop sorting, his right hand still moving through the ore stream in its steady pattern. How did you find this place? He asked, his voice muffled and indistinct through the mask, like a voice traveling down a long pipe. Gunyan took a military-grade encryption chip from her pocket and placed it on the edge of the conveyor belt. The chip was tiny, the size of a fingernail, its casing camouflaged to look like an ordinary data storage wafer. But one glance told Han Shu what it was. The interface spec was perfectly compatible with his second-hand terminal, and engraved on the casing was a serial number whose last 4 digits were the date of Red Crow's maiden test flight. Very few people knew that date. Even fewer could have it embossed on a piece of military encryption hardware. Gunyan didn't answer his question. She simply said, "This chip contains something you need to see. If you have any questions after viewing it, use your existing communication channel to reply to this address." She handed him a slip of paper. Actual paper, not a digital note. On it was written a dead-drop address, some kind of relay forwarding code for a military anonymous server. The paper's fibers quivered faintly in the sulfur wind. Han Shu did not take the paper. He tossed the next sulfurous rock into the waste chute, his right hand continuing its motion through the ore stream without any change in rhythm. After a few seconds, he said, "Put it on the tool rack next to the belt. 3rd slot." Gunyan did as he said, then replaced her mask and turned to leave. Her silhouette receded through the yellow curtain of sulfur wind and disappeared at the entrance to the extraction zone. That night, Han Shu returned to his iron shack and inserted the encryption chip into his data terminal. The terminal took a full 47 seconds to complete identity authentication. This level of military encryption chip was typically used in special operations field missions. Without the correct decryption key, any forced read attempt would trigger the chip's internal self-destruct, melting the storage die into a blob of conductive polymer. But Han Shu's terminal skipped the authentication challenge entirely and went straight to the root directory. There was only one possibility. The chip had been manufactured with his biometrics whitelist from the start, which meant that Gunyan, or whoever was behind her, had identified Han Shu as the sole legitimate recipient before the chip was even fabricated. He opened the files on the chip. The first was a case initiation report from the United Fleet Internal Investigations Division, serial number starting with CI-7872, internal top secret. It had been opened 5 years ago, 2 years after the Red Crow incident. In terse language, the report documented investigators' discovery of discrepancies in the Red Crow accident investigation. The first anomaly was a technical detail. The shipboard AI's memory dump should, in theory, have a complete copy preserved in Fleet Headquarters quantum backup servers. The accident report claimed the backup was destroyed in an electromagnetic pulse incident. But investigators pulled the records of all EMP events at headquarters that day and found only one, at a military test range 300 kilometers away from the backup server's physical location, with the yield rating entirely insufficient to affect the server. That alone wasn't enough to overturn the conclusion, but it was enough to warrant an internal investigation. The second file was the complete quantum memory dump of the shipboard AI. It was the largest file on the chip. Decompressed, it nearly maxed out the storage on Han Shu's battered terminal. The AI memory dump contained Red Crow's entire navigation log, from departure to loss of contact, the navigation core's operational records, and all data interactions with Fleet Headquarters servers. Han Shu paged through the logs. When he reached page 37, his fingers froze on the keyboard. The log contained a record of an encrypted voice call, placed 47 minutes before Red Crow lost contact, between the Logistics Command Director's office and the flagship's bridge. Chan Guanhai's voice, slightly distorted by channel compression, registered a 99.7% match on voice sprint analysis. Navigation data has been updated. Proceed with the new coordinates. No need to wait for Han Shu's confirmation. His authorization has been temporarily frozen. In the background, someone asked a question, judging by context, the bridge's duty navigation officer asking if secondary verification was required, and Chan Guanhai answered, "If anything goes wrong, I'll take the blame." Those 4 words had been faithfully recorded by the AI in its quantum memory, surviving at the edge of a black hole's gravity well, and ultimately transmitted back to the Fleet Headquarters deep servers via the Quantum Entanglement Backup Network. The third file was the navigation core's changelog, recovered from data residue that had been deep deleted, but not yet physically overwritten in the AI's memory. Deep deletion meant file-level removal by the operating system, but on physical storage media, data doesn't disappear immediately. It's merely flagged as overwritable. If that region is read before being overwritten, the residual data can still be recovered. The technique isn't particularly complex, but the precondition is that the storage medium wasn't physically destroyed. And as it happened, Red Crow's AI memory data had been instantaneously synced back to the headquarters server via quantum entanglement backup moments before the ship fell into the black hole. The server administrator had not performed a timely physical overwrite, and that administrator had been transferred from the post 2 months after the accident. The transfer order was signed by Chang Guanhai. The residual changelog showed that 85 minutes after Red Crow's departure, someone had remotely modified 3 core parameters of the gravitational field compensation algorithm using a top-level authorization account. The login account for the modification bore Chan Guanhai's digital signature. The IP address traced back to the Fleet Logistics Command's central control room. The operation timestamp differed by less than 4 minutes from Chen Guanhai's. If anything goes wrong, I'll take the blame call. After the modification was complete, the login logs and operation records were manually purged one by one. The operator even emptied the system recycle bin. But the AI kernel had a low-level property. Any modification to the navigation core would leave an indelible safety imprint on the physical memory, a redundant security mechanism specifically designed to record all changes to core systems in case a malicious intruder tried to destroy evidence. Han Shu had designed this feature himself. Han Shu sat in his iron shack through the entire night. On campus, nighttime temperatures dropped to -20 degrees Celsius. A layer of white frost formed on the iron walls. The air filter hummed with a stark clarity in the silence. He replayed the 4-minute voice recording 7 times. Each time he heard the casual ease in Chen Guanhai's tone when he said, "I'll take the blame," as if remarking that the cafeteria food wasn't good that day. He cross-referenced every parameter in the changelog against Red Crow's flight trajectory, constructing a complete time series chart on the screen. At 5 in the morning the chart was finished. 85 minutes. Parameters modified. 89 minutes. Flagship enters black hole gravity well edge. 93 minutes. Navigation system calculates erroneous course. 97 minutes. Flagship crosses the gravity slingshot return threshold. 104 minutes. Signal lost. A murder timeline precise to the minute. At dawn he compressed and encrypted all the files and transmitted them through his covert quantum tunnel back to the dead drop address Gunyen had left. His only note was a single line. "I know." 3 months later, the annual Red Crow System Navigation Safety Summit was held in the Space City Cloud Capital. Cloud Capital was the largest artificial celestial body humanity had ever built, 20 kilometers in diameter, with internal simulated gravity generated by rotation. Its dome was covered by a transparent energy shield, beyond which lay the eternal deep space. The summit's main venue was the Dome Hall at Cloud Capital's core. The entire dome was a giant panoramic screen, displaying in real time a star map projection of the galactic spiral arm. Security at Cloud Capital's docking port that day was elevated to the highest level. Every attendee entering the Dome Hall passed through 3 biometric checkpoints. No electronic devices were permitted inside. The security detail was a hand-picked elite squad from the United Fleet Special Operations Command, their black combat uniforms bearing no unit insignia. The security director repeated over the encrypted comm channel, "The founder of Deep Abyss has confirmed attendance." Security level equivalent to the Fleet Commander-in-Chief's standard. No one knew who Deep Abyss was. The name had surfaced in the inner circles of the interstellar shipping industry just a week ago. A navigation safety consulting firm registered in Freeport with a symbolic registered capital of 1 credit. In a single week it had sequentially secured safety consultant appointment letters from the United Fleet, the Interstellar Arbitration Court, and the 3 largest shipping alliances. The final appointment letter bore the personal signature of the United Fleet's Commander-in-Chief. Inside the Dome Hall, Chen Guanhai sat in the very center of the front row, his 4 gold stars gleaming with a metallic luster under the dome's cool lighting. Beside him was Zhou Shuren, founder of Star Zenith Navigation. The 2 men spoke in low tones, nodding occasionally. In the second row sat Zhang Lan, the stiff white cuff of her shirt showing beneath the sleeve of her black Chief Justice's robe. She was leafing through a handsomely bound summit program, the cover emblazoned with Zhou Shuren's company logo. On the dais, the new director of the Interstellar Navigation Authority stood at the microphone. Behind him, the giant screen displayed a 3-dimensional model of the next-generation navigation safety standard architecture, designed by Star Zenith Navigation, rotating slowly, its lines as fluid as a work of art. The Star Zenith Intelligent Navigation Verification System we are launching will fundamentally transform the existing model of route safety management. The director's voice boomed. He gestured in the air, controlling the model's rotation on the giant screen. This system, developed under the leadership of Mr. Zhou Shuren of Star Zenith Navigation, has already passed fleet safety certification and is about to be rolled out as a mandatory standard across the entire fleet. The side door swung open. A man walked in, dressed in the gray casual wear of an ordinary summit attendee, wearing the simplest of attendee lanyards. His pace was unhurried. As he moved down the aisle between the seating sections, several security personnel, receiving orders through their earpieces, stepped forward to intercept him, only to be jostled aside by a figure hurrying toward the man. The summit chair, the chief administrator of Cloud Capital, a white-haired old politician known for his composure, practically stumbled up to the man, sweat beading visibly on his forehead. He kept his voice low but couldn't control the tremor. "Mr. Han, why did you come through here? We thought you would be arriving by private shuttle. The landing pad had prepared." Han Shu did not stop. He walked through the crowd to the side of the dais and picked up a spare microphone. The feedback whine silenced the entire hall. Chen Guanhai saw his face. That face was much thinner now, cheekbones jutting like blades, eye sockets deeply sunken. But his gaze was like the direct light of a star unfiltered by any atmosphere. Chen Guanhai shot up from his seat, his chair tipping over backward. The metallic crash was amplified by the hall's acoustics. His voice cracked as he screamed, "Security! This man is a penal exile. He should be on campus. Should be serving a life sentence on campus until he dies, right?" Han Shu finished his sentence. His voice wasn't loud, but the dome hall's acoustic system projected it evenly to every corner, each word nailing into steel plate. "I thought so too." He pressed the remote in his hand. The three-dimensional model on the dome's giant screen vanished. In its place appeared an original navigation architecture diagram stamped top secret, blue lines on white background. The modeler's field bore Han Shu's name. The timestamp was 8 years old. In the lower right corner of the diagram were the official United Fleet Ordnance Department serial number and the international copyright mark, as crisp as if freshly printed. Then a second document overlaid it. Official minutes of a United Fleet internal meeting, red header format. The minutes recorded a closed-door meeting of the Logistics Command Director's office, with only 2 attendees, Cheng Guanhai and Zhou Binghuai. The minutes' content unfolded line by line. Cheng Guanhai proposed sidelining Han Shu from the Red Crow project team. Zhou Binghuai stated that a third party could issue the navigation safety audit report. The final consensus. Audit authority for the final version of the navigation core to be transferred to Director Cheng Guanhai's direct technical team. A collective gasp filled the hall. Journalist camera drones dove from their hovering positions beneath the dome, surrounding the dais in a rotating filming array. Flashbulbs turned the hall into daylight. Cheng Guanhai's face went ashen. He turned and hissed into his communicator, "Kill the main screen! Now!" The main screen ignored him and continued playing. It had an independent power supply, and its control ports were not located within the venue. The image switched to a holographic recording. The security footage from Red Crow's navigation bay. In the footage, Cheng Guanhai himself walked into the navigation bay, sat down at a terminal, and operated the keyboard for 12 minutes. The recording's timestamp ticked forward, second by second, matching the shipboard AI memory log precisely. Overlaid in the lower right corner of the footage was a line of text. Deep layer backup data. United Fleet Central Server. Quantum timestamp immutable. Zhang Lan rose from the second row. The hem of her black robe snagged on the armrest of her chair. She yanked it free with a violent tug and started walking briskly toward the side door. At the side door stood 2 individuals in dark gray combat uniforms, wearing no unit identifiers, their shoulder patches blank. They stood side by side, motionless, simply and quietly blocking the exit. "Sit down, Chief Justice Jiang." Han Shu didn't look at her. He spoke into the microphone. His tone was devoid of any emotion. "Your seat hasn't been cleared yet." For a single instant, the breath of over 2,000 people in the dome hall caught simultaneously. The air felt vacuum-sucked. Then the noise erupted, a shockwave like a supernova. Reporters pounded furiously on their real-time transmission platforms, words flying at light speed to news terminals across the galaxy. A representative from a shipping alliance rose directly from his seat and shouted into his communicator, "Dump All-Star Zenith navigation bonds now." Several mid-level officers from Fleet Logistics turned pale and quietly removed their command badges. Han Shu waited for the first wave of uproar to recede before continuing. He took the old encryption chip from his pocket and held it up to the microphone. The chip's casing was still stained with campus sulfide marks, the deep yellow corrosion spots stark under the dome lights. This chip contains all the navigation core logs from before Red Crow went down. It has the operation records of you logging into the navigation core remotely, 85 minutes after the flagship departed. It has the specific values of the 3 key parameters you altered in the gravitational field compensation algorithm. It has every command you manually deleted from the logs afterward, automatically backed up by the AI kernel. 7 years ago, you thought this data fell into the black hole along with the flagship. But Red Crow SAI had a deep security mechanism you never understood. Any modification to the core system leaves an indelible quantum imprint on the physical memory. You deleted the log files. You deleted the backups. You even emptied the system recycle bin. But you couldn't delete the ghost marks left by electric charges on the deep insulating layers of the storage units. He placed the chip on the dais and nudged it forward half an inch. The chip slid a small distance across the smooth surface and stopped beside the microphone stand. The green indicator light on the chip still blinked. "On this," he said, "is all the evidence of your murder." Chun Guanhai's lips opened, closed, opened again. A hoarse syllable scraped out of his throat, like the first turn of a rusted door hinge. The fleet officers behind him shifted half a step away, almost in unison, the scrape of their chairs piercing in the silence. Gun Yin stood up from the very back row. She was wearing the formal investigator's uniform of the United Fleet Internal Investigations Division, deep blue fabric, crisp and unwrinkled, the division's gold badge on her left chest. She walked to the dais and drew a paper document from her briefcase. In an age of ubiquitous electronic documents, paper symbolized absolute formal authority. She flipped to the last page and displayed it to the entire hall. It bore the electronic seal of the United Fleet Commander-in-Chief and the red physical seal of the Interstellar Arbitration Court's Oversight Committee. Following a joint investigation by the United Fleet Internal Investigations Division and the Interstellar Arbitration Court Oversight Committee, the following decisions are hereby rendered. Her voice was clear, each word echoing through the dome hall. First, the conclusion of the Red Crow accident investigation from 7 years ago is revoked. The incident is reclassified as an act of human sabotage. Second, Chen Guanhai, Director General of the United Fleet Logistics Command, is charged with 17 counts including tampering with navigational safety data, forging safety audit reports, perjury and framing, and endangering starship safety. He is stripped of all posts effective immediately and remanded to military tribunal. Third, Star Zenith Navigation Company is implicated in illegally obtaining military navigation data and securing exclusive operating rights through illicit benefit transfer. All assets are frozen immediately, its operating license revoked. Zhou Shuren is placed under lawful arrest. Fourth, Zhang Lan, Chief Justice of the Interstellar Arbitration Court, is charged with accepting bribes from an interested party during the trial 7 years ago, procedural violations, and deliberate admission of false evidence. She is suspended from duty effective immediately and subject to criminal investigation. As Chun Guanhai was led out of the hall, the 4 gold stars were torn from his epaulets. They rolled onto the Persian carpet, ground into the fibers by the boots of the security personnel who walked past after him. Passing by Han Shu, his steps faltered for a moment. He turned his head, lips moving. Han Shu did not turn. His gaze remained level. He could smell Chun Guanhai's scent. The base notes of the cologne were cedar and leather, but underneath lay a sour body odor born of fear. 7 years ago, in the military tribunal, the man had smelled only of cologne. The atmospheric sulfur content on campus is 3.7%, Han Shu said, his voice very soft, audible only to the two of them. The breath you just took didn't have any sulfur in it, but the prisoner transport you'll be riding in a moment does. The air filtration system at the fleet prison uses the same filter model as campus. They change the cartridges even slower than I used to. Chun Guanhai's pupils dilated to their maximum. He opened his mouth to speak, but the personnel on either side hauled him up by the arms. His toes dragged across the carpet, leaving 2 long scuff marks, disappearing through the side door. The scene of Zhang Lan being taken away was quieter. She rose from her seat and walked toward the side door of her own accord. Passing Gun Yin, she paused, her lips barely moving, her voice compressed almost to inaudibility. When exactly did your investigations division start looking into a 7-year-old case? Gun Yin met her eyes, her gaze steady. The day we received the first batch of ghost data from a shipboard AI. Zhang Lan's eyes narrowed a fraction. Then she continued walking. The black robe flickered at the doorway and vanished. The summit dispersed near midnight. The artificial cloud layer inside the dome hall was dimmed to a starfield mode. The Milky Way stretched across the dome, its simulated starlight illuminating the empty seats and the summit programs scattered on the floor. Han Shu stood before a floor-to-ceiling viewport. Outside the window lay Cloud Capital's artificial sky and the real stars. In the distance, a pulsar rotated slowly, its radiation pulses sweeping across the cosmic dust at intervals precise to 10 to the power of -15 seconds, a lighthouse that never went dark. Gunyan walked up behind him and handed him a cup of coffee. He took it, switching hands. His left hand had fewer scars and was more sensitive to temperature. The cup was scalding, turning his fingertips red. He glanced down at his fingers. The cracks corroded by campus's sulfites had healed, but the scars remained. The deformation of the knuckles was irreversible. The shape of the nails would never return to their original smooth curve. "What's next?" Gunyan asked. She stood beside him, also looking out the viewport. Han Shu took a sip of coffee. The bitterness exploded on his tongue, then slowly shifted to a faint sweetness. He set the cup on the edge of the viewport, the metal base clinking softly against the alloy window frame. His gaze passed through the viewport, through Cloud Capital's dome, past the slowly maneuvering engine plumes of the starships, to a point farther out, where countless navigation routes were being charted, countless starships waiting to depart, countless navigation cores needing to be redesigned, countless tampered datasets waiting to be corrected, and countless truths buried at the edge of a black hole's event horizon, waiting to be salvaged. "Go back to writing code," he said. Gunyan's smile didn't press. She raised her own coffee cup and tapped it lightly against the one he'd placed on the window frame. The two soft clinks were amplified in the emptiness of the dome hall, reflected by its acoustics into fine, fragmented echoes, like the confirmation chime of a terminal when code compilation completes. Late that night, Han Shu and Gunyan took Cloud Capital's late-night shuttle away from the dome. Outside the shuttle's viewport, Cloud Capital's ring structure rotated slowly, the city lights dragging in arcing bands. 3 destroyers from a fleet patrol formation swept past the shuttle's flank. Their bridge running lights flashed 3 times in unison, the universal highest salute in interstellar navigation, usually reserved for ships of honor or fallen comrades. Gunyan glanced at him. "They recognize you." Han Shu watched the patrol formation recede into the distance, saying nothing. His gaze lingered on their vanishing engine plumes for a long time. 3 months later. Freeport. Freeport was the largest neutral trade hub at the edge of the galaxy, belonging to no political power, governed by a set of autonomous agreements collectively maintained by all its merchants. It had the most advanced starship repair docks, the cheapest smuggled electronics, the most authentic cuisine from every star system, and the most chaotic air traffic in the universe. Over 100,000 ships of all types took off and landed on this space station, less than 50 kilometers in diameter every single day. The air traffic control system was perpetually on the edge of overload. Minor scrapes between 2 freighters at the docking lane entrance happened an average of 3 times a day. But there had never been a fatal accident, because everyone knew Freeport's one and only rule: don't get in anyone else's way. Han Shu rented an office on Freeport's 7th level. Office was a generous term. It was a cubicle converted from an abandoned cargo bay, less than 30 square meters, with a single round porthole window facing Freeport's busiest docking lane, number 7. Every morning when the lane gate opened, the engine plumes of the swarming freighters painted the porthole in a ceaselessly shifting light pollution. Green from xenon-ion thrusters, blue from curvature boosters, red from old fusion drives. That window became his backdrop and later, the signature image in all his video interviews. Here, he registered Deep Abyss Navigation Safety Consulting. Registered capital, 1 credit. The company website was built with the simplest static pages. The homepage bore a single line: "If your navigation data is clean, why be afraid of transparency?" Below it was a download link for an open-source navigation safety verification protocol suite. No pricing options. No registration process. No commercial promotional copy whatsoever. The core architecture of this protocol had been hammered out line by Han Shu in his iron shack on campus, on that broken terminal. Its underlying logic wasn't particularly complicated, but the engineering implementation spanned the most advanced techniques in 4 fields: navigation algorithms, quantum communication, distributed ledgers, and zero-knowledge proofs. A single weak point in any of them would have left the entire system vulnerable. And Han Shu had addressed every single point, not because he was a genius, but because he'd had 7 entire years on campus, standing 16 hours a day at the conveyor belt sorting or, with all the spare computational power of his brain devoted to stress testing this system. The rhythm of the conveyor belt was fixed. His fingers moved through the or stream while his mind ran countless parallel simulations. What if this node was compromised? What if the quantum channel was jammed? What if a shipping company tried to forge a verification report? The ore was sorted on the belt, and the vulnerabilities were patched in his head. 7 years over 2,500 days, he simulated every possible attack vector in his mind at that conveyor belt hundreds thousands of times. The initial public release of the Deep Abyss protocol had zero promotion. Han Shu simply made a post on an obscure shipping technology forum, attaching the code repository link and a technical white paper. The post title was, "An open-source navigation verification protocol, dedicated to those who vanished on the wrong course 7 years ago." Within 24 hours, over 4,000 civilian merchant vessels across the galaxy had downloaded and deployed the protocol. It wasn't because he was famous. Back then, almost no one knew who the founder of Deep Abyss was. It was because of a stress test dataset in the white paper. Using publicly available historical fleet navigation data, he had conducted a massive retrospective validation. Out of more than 1.2 million historical voyage records, the Deep Abyss protocol successfully identified 4,312 instances of navigation data anomalies. 43 of those anomalies had already led to navigation incidents of varying severity, including 11 total starship losses. The existing military standard safety audit system on that same dataset had an anomaly detection rate of only 6%. The white paper concluded with a small line of text. The test dataset is open-sourced alongside this white paper. Anyone can reproduce the validation. Feedback welcome. Nobody found any flaws. Instead, 3 independent academic institutions each published technical reviews after verification, their conclusions highly consistent. This protocol achieves the optimal safety boundary theoretically achievable under the current framework for navigation data tamper-proofing. A shipping media outlet's headline was more blunt. What the military couldn't do in 20 years, an anonymous developer did in 1. The real shockwave came on the 4th day. The United Fleet Ordnance Technology Bureau issued an internal memo, originally a working document circulating only within the fleet's technical departments, that was leaked in its entirety onto the public network by an unknown party. The memo's wording was extremely cautious, but its core conclusion was unambiguous. Following technical evaluation, the security architecture of the Deep Abyss protocol is superior to the current military standard in both theoretical robustness and engineering implementation. It is recommended that all fleet technical departments initiate compatibility assessments. The memo bore the electronic signature of the bureau director. The shipping market shifted subtly that day. The stock prices of 3 publicly traded shipping companies plunged simultaneously within 2 hours of the memo's leak, losing over 15%. Not because they had done anything wrong, but because investors suddenly realized a problem. If the security of navigation data could be trivially verified by a third-party open-source tool, then the competitive moats and profit margins built on data opacity would evaporate overnight. The first to panic was the Shipping Alliance. On the 5th day, the Alliance Secretariat issued a sternly worded statement, claiming that open-source navigation verification tools not formally sanctioned by the military may pose unforeseeable risks to navigational safety, and recommending that all member entities postpone adoption until the military completes a formal safety assessment. Less than 30 minutes after the statement was released, the Freeport Shipping Autonomy Association posted a reply. It was a single sentence and its galaxy-wide shares broke 10 million in half a day. If your navigation data is clean, why be afraid of transparency? That sentence spread like a virus. Merchant captains pasted it onto their bridge consoles. Cargo owners wrote it into the supplementary clauses of their shipping contracts. Shipping brokers scrawled it in marker on the whiteboards of trading floors and circled it 3 times. The Deep Abyss protocol's downloads grew exponentially after that day, surpassing 100,000 within a week. Throughout all this, Han Shu did not participate in the public debate. He shut himself in that 30-square-meter office on Freeport, writing code across 3 screens. Gunyan sat on the sofa behind him, a tablet propped on her knee, processing the hundreds of messages flooding in through the comm channels simultaneously. Requests for technical support from shipping companies, demands for formal meetings from military departments, interview requests from the media, investment offers from venture capital, anonymous threats telling him it would be best to back off. She filtered out all the noise, forwarded the important items to Han Shu, and moved on to the next batch. Gun Yan had formally resigned from the United Fleet Internal Investigations Division a month earlier. Her resignation letter was short, a single sentence. The investigation is complete. New work is about to begin. She didn't specify what that new work was, but everyone knew. After the internal investigation into the Red Crow case concluded, she had been on the shortlist for deputy director of the division. Her resignation prompted her direct superior to call 3 times to persuade her to stay. She took every call and gave the same reply each time. I found a more effective way to create change than investigation. The day she joined Deep Abyss, Han Shu handed her a document. It was an amendment to Deep Abyss's Articles of Incorporation, changing the legal structure from a sole proprietorship to a limited partnership, adding a new partner with a 50% stake. At the end of the amendment, in the signature section, he had already signed his name. The blank space left for her had Gun Yan written beside it in pencil. He handed her a pen, a cheap plastic pen he'd bought at a Freeport Street stall with a crack in the cap. She took it and signed her name in the blank space. The cracked cap fell off and rolled to the edge of the table, where Han Shu's finger stopped it. "First time signing a company document," she said, recapping the pen. "The pen isn't great." Han Shu took the pen from her hand and put it in his pocket. "Next time we'll use a better one," he said. But later, for all of Deep Abyss's important documents, he used that same pen to sign. The crack was always there. Each time he pressed down, it left a tiny indentation on the paper, like a seal that only 2 people could recognize. Chen Guanhai's trial began a month later. The military tribunal was held on Reef Rock, the same asteroid, the same courtroom, even the same seating arrangement as Han Shu's trial 7 years ago. But this time, Chen Guanhai sat in the defendant's box, the magnetic locks of his cuffs clamped to the metal armrests, a glass of water with a slice of lemon before him, its surface a perfect sphere in the microgravity. Gun Yan sat in the first row of the gallery, wearing the formal uniform of the investigations division. Though she had resigned, the division director had personally invited her to attend as a special consultant during the trial. Han Shu did not attend. He stayed in his office on Freeport, watching the trial livestream over an encrypted channel. The signal traversed the quantum relay stations between star systems with a delay of only 0.3 seconds. The prosecution's evidentiary chain was built on the Deep Abyss protocol as its core technical scaffold. The shipboard AI's ghost data, the quantum timestamp verification, the physical residue of the navigation core changelog. All of this evidence was packaged into a standardized verification workflow of the Deep Abyss protocol. Anyone with the appropriate technical clearance could reproduce the complete verification process of the evidentiary chain in real time on the courtroom's provided terminals. When the prosecutor demonstrated in open court how to use the Deep Abyss protocol to verify the exact timestamp of Chen Guanhai's tampering with the navigation data, several non-technical members of the jury showed expressions of understanding for the first time. Technology wasn't meant to inspire awe. It was meant to be understood. The principle was simple, but before the Deep Abyss protocol, no courtroom evidence presentation system had ever achieved it. Chen Guanhai's defense attorney attempted to attack the evidence's admissibility, arguing that the shipboard AI's ghost data constituted a deleted file on the physical storage medium, and its validity as evidence was questionable. The prosecutor, however, pulled up the technical documentation Han Shu had left behind years ago when designing the Red Crow SAI kernel. This document was archived in the Fleet Ordnance Department's formal records, with a complete archival timestamp and version number. The documentation explicitly stated, "Navigation Core Security Redundancy Mechanism. All modification operations to the core system shall generate an indelible, read-only mirror in a segregated region of physical memory. This mirror shall be legally considered an equivalent record of the navigation log." The author of that documentation was signed as Han Shu, dated 2 years before Red Crow's maiden flight. In other words, 2 years before the incident, Han Shu had already stipulated, at the technical architecture level, the legal evidentiary status of this data. The 7-member jury took less than half an hour of closed-door deliberation to reach a unanimous verdict. Chen Guanhai was sentenced to life imprisonment, no parole, no commutation. At sentencing, he stood in the defendant's box, head bowed. The 4 gold stars were no longer on his shoulders. His uniform collar was unbuttoned, His shirt collar flipped out. His lips kept moving as if repeating something over and over. The audio captured by the courtroom's recording equipment was later noted by the court recorder as defendant muttering to self, content unintelligible. But Gun Yen, sitting in the front row, vaguely made out a few syllables. He was repeating a fleet navigation signal code, the departure designation for the flagship Red Crow. She filed this detail away in her memory but never mentioned it to Han Shu. Zhou Shuren's trial concluded earlier. Star Zenith Navigation was found to have siphoned over 40 billion interstellar credits, in excess profits over its 5 years of operation, by exploiting the altered Red Crow navigation coordinates. The company's assets were fully confiscated and used to establish a trust called the *Red Crow Crew Family Compensation Fund. The fund's first chairperson, elected by the victims' families, was the white-haired mother of a young ensign who had served as an assistant navigation officer on the Red Crow. She spoke very softly. At the fund's inauguration ceremony, she said one sentence that was widely quoted across the galaxy's media. "Money won't bring back my son, but I hope it can help more families not lose their children." As she spoke, she clutched a yellowed photograph. In it, her son wore the uniform of the Fleet Academy, smiling before a model of the Red Crow flagship. Jiang Lan's case was heard in a non-public proceeding within the Interstellar Arbitration Court. As a former Chief Justice, she enjoyed certain procedural privileges. But the Oversight Committee's investigation conclusion was public. She had accepted legal consulting fees, funneled through multiple layers of offshore shell companies by Star Zenith Navigation, totaling 30 million interstellar credits. During Han Shu's trial 7 years ago, she had deliberately excluded key evidence that could have proven the navigation core anomaly, and in internal judicial email groups, she had repeatedly used inappropriate language to steer other judges toward a presumption of guilt. These emails were recovered from the arbitration court's deep servers by the investigations division's forensic system, using a recovery technique that traced its lineage directly back to Han Shu's ghost data extraction method. Jiang Lan was ultimately sentenced to 12 years imprisonment, stripped of her Chief Justice title, and banned for life from holding any public office. She was led away wearing a prison uniform instead of her robe. The uniform was too large. The sleeves covered her hands. As she walked, she instinctively held her chin at the exact same angle she had used when prosecuting Han Shu in the military tribunal all those years ago. Only the aggressive light in her eyes had been entirely extinguished. The marshal who escorted her later mentioned in an interview that Jiang Lan had asked a single question on the prisoner transport ship. What were the exact navigation coordinates where Red Crow went down? The marshal didn't answer, and she didn't ask again. After his son's arrest, Zhou Binghuai lived alone in a retirement facility on Cloud Capital. Gun Yen went to see him once, bringing a complete copy of the evidence chain. The old man sat in his wheelchair and read through all the documents without saying a word. After finishing, he closed the folder and rested it on his knees, silent for a long time. Then he spoke, his voice as flat as a spirit level. Back then, Chen Guanhai told me that as long as Han Shu was removed from the project team, the Red Crow route would be reallocated, and Star Zenith could get the operating rights. He didn't say the flagship would go down. He didn't say 3,200 people would die. But I knew he had altered the navigation data. You knew and you didn't stop it, Gun Yen said. Yes. The old man lifted his eyes to look at her. The vitreous humor of his eyeballs had been clouded by age, but his gaze was still direct. Greedy people always underestimate the price, because the price often falls on others' heads. By the time it falls on their own, it's too late. Gun Yen did not relay the content of this meeting to Han Shu, but Han Shu found the interview record she had archived on the company's encrypted server. All information repositories at Deep Abyss were shared, with no permission tiers. She had chosen not to tell him, but had left it where he could see it any time. It was a form of communication more precise than words. In Deep Abyss's second year, a subtle fracture appeared in the Shipping Alliance's stance. The harshly worded boycott statement remained on the Alliance's official website, but the small and medium-sized shipping companies within the Alliance were deploying the Deep Abyss protocol, one ship after another. These companies had small fleets, flexible routes, and short decision chains. They didn't need layers of approval to decide what system to use to verify their navigational safety. And the open-source nature of the Deep Abyss protocol meant their technical teams could inspect every line of source code directly. No NDAs, no licensing fees, no dependence on any third-party technical support. For small and medium-sized fleets, that kind of freedom was far more attractive than the Alliance's recommendation. The first to fully deploy was the Freeport Shipowners Association. Freeport shipowners had always been fiercely independent, with an instinctive aversion to any recommendation from an authority. The association president was an old captain with a short, grizzled beard named Tang. 3 deep scars, visible to the bone, crossed the back of his hands, relics of emergency repairs in cargo holds in his youth. At the association's monthly meeting, he slammed the table. What do those desk jockeys at Fleet know about navigation safety? Have they ever used a beat-up old curvature compensator like ours? Do they know how to eyeball a course deviation when the NAV system throws an error? This Deep Abyss protocol, I had my fleet's chief engineers go through it module by module. The code is written clearer than the military's damn manuals. A man who can write code like that, and who says navigation safety should be transparent, I believe him. In the first quarter after old Captain Tang's fleet deployed the protocol, a rare navigation coordinate deviation event occurred. One of his freighters, passing through the gravity well of an uncharted asteroid, had its NAV system throw a navigation data anomaly. The onboard Deep Abyss protocol triggered an automatic full route verification, and within 7 seconds, pinpointed the anomalous data source. A set of gravitational field correction signals broadcast by a military satellite relay station had been maliciously tampered with by a third party, introducing a minute error into the gravitational field data. The error was tiny, almost unnoticeable under normal cruising conditions. But when passing through the narrow safety window of the asteroid's gravity well, that tiny deviation was enough to push the freighter off its safe course by 0.3 radians. In curvature flight, 0.3 radians meant the localized gravitational gradient differential across the hull exceeded structural safety thresholds. The freighter's navigation officer, seeing the red alert pop up from the Deep Abyss protocol, instinctively executed an emergency evasive maneuver. A post-incident technical analysis showed that without that pop-up, the freighter would have entered an irreversible gravity slingshot trajectory 17 minutes later, ultimately being ejected into the interior of the asteroid belt. Probability of survival 0. Crew aboard 24. Cargo. Full load of iridium ore. Value exceeding 200 million credits. At the press conference afterward, old Captain Tang projected the freighter's navigation log onto the big screen. He pointed his laser at that line of red alert record and said to the room full of reporters, "This damn rock nearly took 24 of my people and nearly took my company. Deep Abyss caught it. The military system missed it. Guess which one I'll be using from now on?" A reporter asked what he thought of the Shipping Alliance's boycott statement. He made a gesture at the camera. In Freeport slang it roughly translated to, "The hell do I care what they think?" That clip was cut into a short video and shared millions of times across the galaxy's shipping communities. The Alliance's boycott front began to crumble after Captain Tang's press conference. The first to withdraw were 2 mid-sized interstellar shipping groups, each issuing a public letter with nearly identical wording, the gist being, "We do not believe open source equals insecure. On the contrary, open source means more eyes scrutinizing the code, which is itself a security mechanism." Half a month later, the Alliance's third-largest member, a megacarrier with over 8,000 merchant vessels, announced it was incorporating the Deep Abyss protocol into its standard corporate safety review procedures. The Alliance Secretariat issued no new boycott statements. They simply and quietly removed the old statement from the homepage of their website, replacing it with a discrete link titled, "Industry Recommendations on Navigation Safety Verification Tools." Nobody clicked on it. Deep Abyss's office on Freeport expanded from 30 square meters to 80. The new space was created by knocking through the wall into an adjacent abandoned cargo bay. The wall with the round porthole overlooking the docking lane remained, the engine plumes outside still their kaleidoscopic light pollution. Han Shu's workstation didn't change, the same iron frame desk and old swivel chair. After campus, he developed a strange fixation with chairs, only able to sit on a specific firmness. Anything softer gave him back pain. The new space filled with a few more workstations, staffed by technical talent Gunyan had recruited from across the galaxy. There was a retired navigation engineer from the fleet, a former route planner from a shipping company, a system architect fresh out of school who had turned down a lucrative offer from a major corporation. Everyone's starting salary was lower than their previous job. The attrition rate was 0. Gunyan designed a collaboration structure for the company with no hierarchical tiers. All decisions were made by open vote on the blockchain. Any member could initiate a proposal. Voting weight was unrelated to seniority or title, tied only to the technical evaluation of the proposal. The annual budget was publicly posted. Every expenditure could be traced on an open ledger. She wrote this model up into a white paper titled Open Source Security: From Technical Transparency to Organizational Transparency. The white paper didn't mention Han Shu by name, but the title page carried a quote from him. The best security isn't hiding the vulnerabilities, it's giving everyone the capability to find them. That sentence was later engraved on the gate frame of Freeport's docking lane number 7, visible to every captain entering or leaving Freeport during the 30-second window when the gate was open. On the 4th anniversary of the Red Crow disaster, Han Shu went to Cloud Capital alone. The Dome Hall in Cloud Capital had canceled all commercial events for the day. In the center of the hall, a new memorial had been erected. The monument was a piece of raw ore extracted from Extraction Zone 6 on campus. Its surface was riddled with the pits of sulfide erosion, the deep yellow corrosion lines like some ancient geological script. The pedestal was made from materials provided by the United Fleet, hull alloy from the same class of starship as Red Crow. The Fleet Ordnance Department had released an unused piece of keel plate from the mothballed Red Crow class spare parts inventory. It was cut, rust-proofed, and set into the pedestal. On the face of the monument were carved 3,200 names, ordered alphabetically. No ranks, no titles, no ages. The last line of text was engraved on the steel of the pedestal. They should have arrived. Han Shu stood before the monument for a long time. The dome hall was crowded. There were family members of the Red Crow crew, active-duty fleet officers, representatives from shipping companies, and ordinary people who only knew the history from news reports. No one recognized him. He wore a plain dark gray coat, no insignia, indistinguishable in the crowd. Only one of the fleet honor guards maintaining order near the memorial gave him a second glance as he passed, a brief flicker of confusion in his eyes, quickly suppressed by drilled-in discipline back into blankness. He laid a bouquet of flowers at the base of the monument. The flowers were bought at a shop in the Cloud Capital space station, small white blooms cultivated in zero gravity. Their petals floated in the low-gravity air several times longer than they would on a planet. The bouquet landed on the pedestal with a sound as soft as a water drop on paper. As he turned to leave, his peripheral vision caught an old man in a wheelchair, in the shadows at the side of the monument, a gray blanket over his knees, as still as a part of the monument's shadow. It was Zhou Binghuai. Han Shu stopped in front of him. The old man was very old now. His skin was like crumpled and re-smoothed parchment. The backs of his hands were covered with age spots. Hanging from the armrest of his wheelchair was a clear plastic document folder containing a stack of yellowed papers. He looked up at Han Shu, the cloudiness in his eyes heavier than what Gunyan had described years ago, but his coherence remained when he spoke. He said he knew what Chen Guanhai had done back then. He knew before the Red Crow even departed. Not all the details, but he knew the navigation data had been altered, knew the safety audit report was forged, knew the order freezing Han Shu's authorization had come from Chan Guanhai's office. He hadn't stopped it. Not because he was part of the conspiracy, but because he hadn't stopped it. His son, Zhou Shuren, had been lobbying the fleet to open the Red Crow route civilian operating rights at the time, and Chan Guanhai was the final signatory on that approval. Stopping Chan Guanhai meant antagonizing the signatory. Not stopping him meant wagering the lives of 3,200 people on a bet he didn't think he could lose. I thought he was just massaging the data, making the route application materials look better. The old man's voice was dry as grinding gravel. I didn't know he would alter the gravitational field compensation parameters. Change those, and a starship loses all course calibration when approaching a major gravity source. I didn't think he'd dare. He dared, Han Shu said. Yes. The old man looked down at his hands. Those hands had once signed countless route approval documents. each concerning the safe transport of millions of tons of cargo. Greedy people always overestimate their luck. Han Shu said nothing more. He turned and left. At the exit of the dome hall, he paused and looked back. In his wheelchair, the old man was pulling the documents from the plastic folder with trembling hands, laying them out one by one on his knees. The distance was too great to see what they were, but Han Shu knew the approval records for the Red Crow route change from that year. Zhou Binghuai's signature was on the lower right corner of every page. The date: 3 days before the flagship's departure. He didn't go back for those documents. They would eventually be filed by Gunyan in Deep Abyss's public database, accessible to all. That night, Zhou Binghuai handed the documents to the Fleet Honor Guard by the monument, with an attached note: delivered to the Deep Abyss Company archives. The handwriting was identical to those signatures from 15 years ago. Only the trembling of the strokes could no longer be hidden. That night Han Shu returned to Freeport. The office light was still on. Gunyan was at her workstation, 3 terminals compiling code in front of her. She heard the door, didn't look up, her fingers still on the keyboard. She was writing the next major version update for the Deep Abyss protocol, a core module called the Navigation Attestation Chain, a distributed verification network that would allow any starship, before entering a high-risk route, to pull historical safety data for that route from multiple independent nodes, rather than relying on a single data source from the military or a shipping company. The underlying architecture of this network used zero-knowledge proofs, meaning a starship could verify the authenticity of route data without exposing its commercially sensitive information. The technical proposal was half-written. She was stuck on a balance point between privacy protection and verification efficiency. Han Shu walked over, leaned down to look at her screen, scanned a few lines of code, and pointed at a module interface. Change this to parallel verification. Split each route into multiple gravitational segments, verify them separately, then do a weighted summary at the end. Don't store raw data during verification, just the results. Gunyan said nothing. She deleted the code and rewrote it. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, the logical framework of the new solution taking shape within 20 minutes. After writing the final function definition, she leaned back in her chair, rubbed her wrist, and looked up at him. When this update goes out, the Shipping Alliance's lobbying group will probably be on their way to Freeport with their protest letters pre-written. Han Shu took off his coat and hung it on the back of his chair, then sat down at his own workstation and started processing the backlog of navigation anomaly reports. Then it means we're doing the right thing, he said. In the 5th year, the Deep Abyss protocol's coverage among the galaxy's merchant vessels surpassed 60%. The opposition within the Shipping Alliance vanished completely, replaced by negotiation talks. The Alliance wanted to incorporate the Deep Abyss protocol's core standards into a mandatory industry safety regulation, on the condition that Deep Abyss relinquish control over the standard-setting process and transfer technical decision-making power to a multi-stakeholder committee, led by the Alliance. This was a common play in technical standards, essentially using the guise of cooperation, to co-opt an open standard and return the standard-setting power to the major corporations. Gunyan sat through 2 rounds of negotiations. 10 minutes before the 3rd round began, she sent Han Shu a message. They want us to give up control. In return, they offer a committee seat. Han Shu, in his Freeport office debugging the concurrency performance of a new module, stopped and typed back a 2-word reply. No deal. Gunyan pocketed her phone, stood up, and smiled at the table full of Alliance representatives and their legal team. The Deep Abyss protocol will remain fully open source, and will not join any collaborative framework that requires surrendering standard-setting authority. If the Alliance wishes to adopt the Deep Abyss protocol as a recommended industry standard, you are welcome to do so at any time. The standard text is public. The code is public. No one needs anyone's permission to use it. As for a committee seat, we decline. We choose to vote with code, not with seats. The Alliance representatives looked at each other. The chief negotiator, a 30-year veteran of shipping policy, adjusted his glasses and attempted to reframe the discussion around the importance of industry stability. Gunyan had already pushed back her chair, picked up her briefcase, and added, "The precondition for industry stability is data transparency. Transparency doesn't need a committee. It just needs everyone to have the same permissions to see the same data." As she walked out of the meeting room, the Shipping Alliance's media PR team had already drafted a press release titled "Deep Abyss Refuses Industry Cooperation," ready to slap on the label of undermining industry stability. But before they could publish, the Freeport Shipowners Association and 7 small and medium-sized shipping alliances jointly released a petition supporting the Deep Abyss Protocol's independent open-source status. The petition's signature block held the electronic signatures of over 3,000 captains. Many signatures included a brief note. "My ship has been saved by Deep Abyss more than once." The Alliance's PR piece shattered into foam against the information torrent of that petition. No reputable media outlet would give it the front page. Later that autumn, the United Fleet formally incorporated a streamlined version of the Deep Abyss Protocol into the factory verification standard for new generation starship navigation systems. It wasn't a replacement for the military's own safety system, but a parallel verification layer. Any military starship receiving navigation data would simultaneously run the Deep Abyss Protocol's verification process. The two results would cross-check each other. An anomaly flagged by either would require a halt for manual review. The military called this heterogeneous redundancy verification. The principle wasn't new, but previously it had been constrained by the lack of a sufficiently reliable open-source protocol to serve as the heterogeneous component. The independence and transparency of the Deep Abyss Protocol filled that void. Gun Yin represented Deep Abyss at the military's signing ceremony. She wore a simple dark blue suit, the Deep Abyss Company pin on her left lapel, a star composed of qubit symbols, beneath it a fine line representing a navigation route's safety threshold. After the signing, the fleet commander-in-chief shook her hand and asked in a lowered voice, "Honshu still refuses to come?" Gun Yin shook her head. "He says the code isn't finished." The commander-in-chief was silent for 2 seconds, then nodded. He understood. Honshu was indeed writing code that day. He was embedding a new anomaly detection module into the Deep Abyss Protocol's foundation, using machine learning methods to comb through massive volumes of historical navigation data for extremely faint precursor signals of route anomalies. Some signals were so weak that, individually, they fell entirely below the noise floor, but they exhibited statistical significance when aggregated at scale. Once mature, this module would be able to predict certain types of navigation data tampering, even issuing warnings before the tampered data entered a navigation system. He had been working for over 30 hours straight. For empty coffee cups lined his desk. The engine plumes outside the window cycled from green to blue to red and back to green. When Gun Yin returned to the office, she found him asleep at the keyboard, his fingers still in typing position. The code cursor on the screen stopped midway through an unfinished comment. She draped a blanket over his shoulders and didn't wake him. When the terminal went into autosleep, the screensaver displayed that unfinished line of code. // dedicated to all those who went and never returned on the wrong course. Your trajectories are our permanent test dataset. In the 6th year, the last remaining fugitive from the Red Crow disaster was captured in an unexpected place. The head of the third-party audit firm that had forged the safety audit report back then had fled after the incident, assuming a false identity on a remote mining asteroid. He'd worked as a payroll accountant in a mining camp for 5 years. On campus, the detail held an almost deliberate irony. In the accounting department of Extraction Zone 6, the very same camp where, less than a kilometer away in the sulfur sorting zone, a man whose life he'd destroyed with a forged report had been rebuilding an entire navigation architecture on a 7-year-old terminal. He was discovered accidentally by the camp's newly deployed Deep Abyss Protocol. The campus mining camp, aiming to improve the safety of its transport fleet, had fully deployed a customized version of the Deep Abyss Protocol 6 months prior, which included an extended module for cross-verifying financial data with voyage records. During a routine data consistency check, the module discovered a batch of historical financial records that had a large number of inexplicable timestamp mismatches with corresponding navigation data. Further tracing revealed that the source of these mismatches pointed to a deregistered audit firm's legal entity identity. A cross-reference matched the individual to the active warrant within seconds. The camp's security system auto-alerted, and Freeport security contractors took him into custody within 3 standard hours. He was arrested at his desk while eating lunch from a standard-issue campus meal box. As he was led away, he looked back over his shoulder toward the conveyor belt area. separated by a few iron walls from the sorting zone where Han Shu had stood for 7 years. Perhaps he understood something in that moment. Perhaps not. But that footage, captured by a campus security camera, was later archived by Gunyan in Deep Abyss's public database. The annotation was a single line. Data does not forget. 10 years later, the General Assembly of the Interstellar Shipping Alliance convened in the Dome Hall of Cloud Capital. The Red Crow Memorial at the Hall Center had become a habitual stopping point for all who passed through. The sulfur pits on the monument stone showed varying textures under the dome's artificial sunlight, like an abstract star chart. The sole agenda item of the assembly was the vote on the Navigation Data Transparency Act. The media and shipping circles had already nicknamed it Han Shu's Law, even though Han Shu had no involvement in its drafting or lobbying. His name didn't even appear in any draft version. But everyone knew where this law had come from. The full draft of the act was less than 20 pages. Its core provisions could be summarized in 3 sentences. All civilian navigational route data must be made open source to the public. The raw safety records of any starship's voyage must be publicly accessible. Any losses caused by the tampering of navigational data shall bear unlimited joint and several liability on the tampering party. There were no exception clauses, no grandfather clauses, no exemptions for commercial confidentiality. The moment the draft was proposed, the shipping giant's lobbying groups booked entire floors of hotels in Cloud Capital, trying to hollow out its core provisions through rewordings, added exceptions, and extended transition periods. The tug-of-war lasted nearly 2 years, each new draft triggering a fresh round of ferocious clashes. The final straw that broke the camel's back was a data analysis report, anonymously submitted to the Assembly's Technical Committee by Deep Abyss. The report tallied the navigation anomaly incidents recorded across the galaxy over the past decade, over 1 million in total. The proportion traceable to human data tampering was a full 11.7%. The report used no adjectives, only numbers and charts. But on the last page, in an appendix, it posted a single photograph, the 3,200 names on the Red Crow Memorial. On the day of the vote, the Dome Hall was packed to capacity. The yeah count on the tally board climbed steadily, finally settling at a figure far exceeding the required supermajority, 89% of the delegates present. When the assembly chair announced the result, the comm channels of every starship in attendance simultaneously received a brief broadcast from the Deep Abyss office on Freeport. The signal was synchronized across every inhabited star system, at light speed via the quantum relay network. The broadcast was a single sentence. The Navigation Data Transparency Act has been passed. From this moment forward, every soul sailing the deep has the right to know if the course they follow is safe. The broadcast's encryption signature bore Gunyan's digital seal, but everyone who had spent any time on Freeport knew whose words those truly were. At the same instant, every starship across the galaxy sounded its horn. The sound propagated at light speed, relayed from star system to star system, from Freeport to Cloud Capital, from Cloud Capital to Reef Rock, from Reef Rock to campus, from campus to those nameless remote mining asteroids. Everywhere there was a starship, there was sound. The horns blew for an entire standard day. In Extraction Zone 6 on campus, the miners stopped the conveyor belts in the sulfur wind, took off their filter masks, and listened to the low, resonant blast of a horn coming from the transport dock, the only horn on campus, from the only space-worthy transport on the planet, its frequency singular, its timbre rough, but it cut through the sulfur wind's attenuation better than any signal. Many years later, Freeport. A package arrived at the office of Han Shu and Gunyan. The return address was Campus, Extraction Zone 6. The sender was listed as all the workers of the camp. The package was small. Inside was a piece of roughly polished ore. Its sulfur content was extremely low, exhibiting a deep blue hue almost never seen on campus. A note was taped to the ore, the handwriting crooked, some characters erased and rewritten over and over. Old Han, the camp installed a new air filtration system. The sulfur smell isn't so strong anymore. We found this rock in a new vein. The brothers thought it looked good, so we're sending it to you. You said back then that there had to be something besides sulfur under this ground. You were right. Also, all the camp transport ships have that protocol you wrote installed now. Old Lou says if anyone tries to mess with the navigation again, the system will catch them itself. The brothers feel a lot more solid running the routes now. Han Shu placed the oar on the office windowsill. Outside the window was Freeport's busiest docking lane. Number 7, countless starship engine plumes painting the porthole in undying light pollution. Every starship passing through the docking gate had a line automatically pop up on its navigation screen. Deep Abyss Protocol Verification passed. Wishing you a safe journey. The font, size, and color of that line all came from the default settings of that broken terminal from years ago. Han Shu had kept it intentionally. The terminal screen had been half dead, its default font uneven, carrying the rough pixelated texture of low-resolution displays of that era. Those words would never have naturally appeared in such a low-res font on a modern starship's navigation screen, but Han Shu had hard-coded it into the protocol. He said it was to remind himself that this protocol had been written on a screen that was half broken. Gunyan stood behind him holding 2 cups of coffee. She handed him one. The cup was the one she'd used for many years. There was a tiny crack in its wall, but it had never leaked. The crack's jagged line bore an uncanny resemblance to the crack in the casing of that campus data terminal. She hadn't done it on purpose. She just noticed it one day while washing the cup years later. She hadn't replaced the cup. Han Shu had never mentioned it. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. Han Shu took the cup and turned the oar on the windowsill, adjusting the angle so the deep blue crystal face caught the starship light streaming through the porthole. The refracted light cast a patch of color on the opposite wall, a subtle color temperature close to the cosmic microwave background radiation. Some extremely cool tone between blue and red, difficult to place precisely on the spectrum. "Data," he said. Gunyan tilted her head, waiting. "Data doesn't lie. People do." Han Shu steadied the oar, his finger tracing lightly across the blue crystal face, the texture cold and rough under his touch. "So we have to make data undeletable. Not because data is smarter than people, but because data is more honest. It won't alter itself out of fear. It won't cover up the truth out of greed. It won't lie because of power. It just records everything faithfully and waits for someone to read it." Gunyan was silent for a moment. Another freighter passed through the docking gate outside, its engine plume dragging a fleeting green arc across the porthole. She set her coffee cup on the windowsill next to his, then picked up her tablet and pulled up the development document for the next Deep Abyss Protocol update. The cursor stopped at the first section of the update notes. She began to type. The sound of the keyboard was crisp and rapid in the quiet office. Han Shu glanced sideways at her screen. She was drafting the preamble to the next version of the protocol. She had only finished one paragraph. "All we have ever done is to build a lighthouse on a reef. Not to punish those who run aground, but so that the ships that follow will not repeat the same course. A lighthouse belongs to no one. Its very existence is both warning and guide." He read it, offered no edits, just finished the last sip of his coffee and set the empty cup on the windowsill next to hers. The 2 cups sat side by side, one intact, one with a tiny crack. Their shadows, cast by the ever-shifting colored light through the porthole, merged, separated, and merged again. Freeport's docking lane number 7 gate opened once more, and a fresh wave of arriving starships streamed in, trailing plumes of every color. On every single navigation screen glowed the same line. "Deep Abyss Protocol Verification passed. Wishing you a safe journey."